Thank you for tuning in, especially during this busy time of year. I'm Dylan Rodgers. I'm the editor-in-chief of the Schoology blog, and we're here today to talk about what it means to bring all of the different departments in a district together into a holistic view and strategy. To do that, to look at this holistic view, we're going to look through the lens of something called the TPACK Framework. So after a quick high-level overview of the TPACK Framework, we're also going to take a look at an interview with the Director of Technology for North Canton City Schools, Kim Nidy. Kim is doing some great work in Ohio there, and a lot of this has to do with the way that she's trying to combine curriculum, technology, and instruction together. And TPACK has actually been a big part of helping her articulate that and bring it all together. We'll look at her district's one-to-one Chromebook program and how that's evolved over time, and also see some of the points, or talk about some of the points that she's learned along the way. I think you'll find those very useful. So let's go ahead and dive in. I'm going to share my screen here. So this is the TPACK framework. TPACK is an instructional framework represented by the acronym TPACK, T-P-A-C-K. And that stands for technological, pedagogical, and content knowledge. Those are the three primary circles you're seeing there. The idea is that education has multiple facets, multiple levels and types of understanding that are just too often considered separate, or at least approached separately. But effective teaching and learning is really a combination of all these elements. So TPACK is designed to help you better understand the fundamental types of knowledge and kind of how they fit together. In other words, I like to think of it like a map that helps you understand what you're teaching, how you're teaching it, and how technology can help. You'll notice that there are intersections between each of those primary circles, and those are really important here because the goal of this is not only to understand pedagogy, content, and technology, but also how they relate with each other. And the combination of all of them is really the end goal here. So I wanted to compare it with another instructional framework that you're probably familiar with, which is SAMR, the SAMR model. So the difference between this and SAMR is that SAMR really focuses on a degree of technology use or a technological integration, which makes it a good tool for kind of evaluating how you're using technology or to what degree. But it doesn't really discuss your goals. It doesn't help you come to an understanding of those goals, or building a strategy, or think about how you could use technology for engaging learning experiences. So TPACK helps you do all that. I think it's a much more comprehensive view of that process. And lastly, I wanted to point out before we hop into this interview is that often when you hear about TPACK, when you think about these things, it's generally in the context of a course or a classroom, which makes sense. But it's also can be a really powerful district tool. And that's exactly what Kim Nidy, the Director of Technology at North Canton City Schools, discussed in the interview. This, I have to say her insight was striking the first time I heard it. It was really interesting to hear how she views all of this, how she's trying to put this all together, and the results that has had throughout her district and in different departments as well. So I'd like to show you that interview now.
Well, so I started, I took the basic framework of, the three circles together and how they overlap. And I really started to think about, you're right, from a technology standpoint, how can we look at ways to support the teachers and even explain why we're using a certain tool, or why we're having that conversation or that training. Because so many times teachers, you do a PD day and it's like, okay, we're going to teach you, Schoology 101, and they come and you're like, click here, click there, and then they go back, and if they really don't feel how it integrates with what they are doing day by day in the classroom, that's very that time is not well spent for them. So I've also been searching for a way to have trainings, but have the trainings wrapped around real work, because that is what helps them. That if you ask any teacher, they will say, please just give me time. Give me time to work with the tools that you're showing me and integrate it. Because like I said, they go to a workshop and then it's right back into their day-to-day routine. And if they're not entirely comfortable with it, or they just haven't had time to really dig into it, they may not apply it, not because they don't want to, but because the timing, just doesn't allow for it. So I've been really looking at how can we make this more valuable for our staff. So what I started to do too was I looked at, okay, we've had all of these discussions with our teachers, mastery of standards, depth of knowledge, Hattie, we've spent a lot of time looking at Hattie's effect size, John Saphir's high expectations teaching. So, and I'm sure that people that are watching this, can check off their list as well with all of these things. They're all topics that we talk about. But I really started to look at how could I take those topics and place them into one of these areas to make what we're doing, make it so that when you look at it, you can see why we're doing it and how it's connected to the other pieces, and how you really have to have one, to support the other. And so that's what I did. I took the model and I started to plug in all of our different initiatives and what it looks like in the model. Then we've spent a lot of time 21st century instruction, which, we're 18 years in now. So this really shouldn't be kind of a new concept, but in some cases it still is. And, so we're still talking about how do we really engage kids with their learning? How are they working together collaboratively? How are they problem solving? Because we know that if they are more engaged with the content through the pedagogy, they're going to retain that, and they're going to be able to apply that. It's much more than just a lower level DOK where a recall of information, a date or a place or a name. So we started to look at then all of those circles together kind of lead us in a path where we can engage with kids in those ways. And then for us, another big piece of it is assessment. So how are we assessing them? Beginning with the end in mind. What do we want them to know? What do we want them to take away from it? And so I just kind of structured it so that we included that kind of below the circles, so that overall you could see, what are we doing here every day? Why do we come here every day? We come here to teach kids and to engage them in learning. I went to a session, like a day-long session not too long ago, about depth of knowledge, and I think I heard it really stated really well. His thing was, take a look at your standards and pull your standards apart. I mean, they may be like multifaceted, and look to see what are the DOK levels of your actual standards, and then look at your assessments. I mean, look at your pedagogy, but look at your assessments. How are you assessing the standard? Does that depth of knowledge level match? And I think and I did this too. I mean, classroom teacher, 20 years. You develop materials, it takes a lot of time, and you want to use what you have. And I think sometimes when we see standards, and I've had this happen where I've gotten new standards or updated standards from the state, we want to take what we have and kind of find ways to connect to the new standard. But really we should be starting with the standard, and then looking back again at things like, how are we teaching it? What's the pedagogy we're using, to engage with it? And how is it lining up with that depth of knowledge? And how is that assessment piece in there?
Yeah. Last time we had talked, you had mentioned that you were having a TPACK meeting, basically. So you have your technology people, you've got your curriculum people, you've got your instructional people, and you're all coming together regularly.
We call them weekly connect meetings. Our assistant superintendent is the one who kind of put them together. So it's him, which he's kind of, over curriculum, and then myself as technology, our special ed director, our gifted coordinator, our director of instruction, and our testing administrator. So we all sit around the table every Tuesday afternoon and, just discuss amongst ourselves different issues. I think it's been really good to kind of keep us all together. We all know what's going on. We all have like a piece of, progressing forward, like, okay, when we leave the meeting, you and I are going to work on this and he's going to work on that. And then we report back. We even incorporate like where we find articles that we find interesting, like something like TPACK, and we share them with the group and then discuss, during the upcoming meeting. And then we try to translate that work into when we meet with our grade level leaders, our department heads. So it's really been a concerted effort to have more of a top-down flow of information, and more importantly, a bottom-up flow of information. So it has to happen both ways. And I don't know that it was doing that all the time. I think it was people felt disconnected from decisions and from programs and projects because they weren't at the table. So we really tried to make a change of that and make sure that we were really communicating more effectively. So those meetings have been a great way to do that.
So you shared with me your TPACK model, which is kind of your filled out version of that. I would love if you could talk us through that a little bit. Maybe just show us. So we've obviously been talking about TPACK at a high level and kind of what that means for an administration. But could you just kind of talk me through that a little bit and give some specifics about that?
Sure. I think the three, I included on there that, what is being learned is the content, how it's learned is the pedagogy, and then what tools you're using are the technology pieces. So, when you start to look at each section of this, actually I'd prefer to start with content because you're starting with content. So as a teacher, we come through college and we learn our particular content. And I think there's always room for more learning with that because a lot of times your content evolves and changes. So, it's really that content knowledge piece to me is keeping up with, what are your standards? What are those concepts and theories of the subject matter that you're teaching? What kind of curriculum do you have in place, that covers the content? And then we really feel strongly that reading literacy is a huge piece of everything that we do every day. Because it's literally, if they can't read the math problem, they're not going to understand how to solve it. So we feel very strongly that literacy for us is very important. So you can see that I put that in the content knowledge part of the discussion. And then when you move over into the PCK, which is kind of the pedagogical content knowledge, we're looking at things like fostering deeper learning, identifying prior knowledge, progress monitoring, learning how to differentiate to meet all the needs of all of our learners, even our RTI and our PBIS programs. So I felt like those kind of were that middle ground in between what we're teaching and how we're teaching, and that it's really important to have that information about your student in order to take the content and deliver it to them effectively. And then when you move over into pedagogical, we have been focusing a lot on UDL, on depth of knowledge, active learning, Hattie, like I said before, growth mindset. Growth mindset is one of the main, we redid kind of our mission statement here in North Canton, and grit and growth mindset, are two things that we value. So we try to talk to our staff about fostering that growth mindset with themselves. I mean, we're doing it hopefully with them, and then they are in turn fostering that with their students in the classroom. So we felt like that was an important fit for us. And so, anything that had to do with how the kids are learning, how we are taking the content and delivering it, we put in there. I had a little trouble, with, those like the TPK, TCK, trying to figure out what was I going to fit in those pieces. And I had a lot of feedback on the TPK end of things. Matter of fact, you helped me with that and some other colleagues as well. But I think it really comes down to, when you're teaching with technology, the whole goal is advancing student learning, and that you have to stay open-minded things change, and that's a difficult thing for some folks to wrap their head around. You know, we're used to, I've learned this and I want to now use it for the next 10 years. And that really doesn't happen today anymore. You just, you know, have to be willing and open to kind of learning, keeping on learning new tools and new ways of doing things. So I feel like that's the bridge in between the pedagogy and the technology, is that just being willing, you know, to have an open mind and learn new ways of doing things. And then the technological knowledge is all of the different things that, you know, for us, we have a Chromebook one-to-one. We're using, you know, Google Apps. We have Schoology. You know, our teachers still love smart notebooks. So, you know, I put that in there. And so there were just tools that we use every day in the classroom. Some of us use all of them. Some of us use maybe a couple of them, but it's a good way to show how they fit. In the traditional model, it looks like technology is the most important piece, and that's not necessarily the case. And actually, it really should be that silent kind of thing in the background where you're having the conversation around the content and the pedagogy, and then, hey, by the way, you know, you can, you know, use Schoology to do this, or you can use your Chromebook for that. So it is a much better approach to look at it kind of underlying rather than up on top. Because I think that's part of the conversation too, where teachers will say, I'm not comfortable with technology, so they'll shy away sometimes from that, and that's not the case. I think they really learn how to use the technology more effectively when they're really applying it to something they're trying to accomplish. It's just like working with students in the classroom. You know, you're using the technology for them to have a learning moment and apply it. It's kind of the same thing when you're working with staff members, is that the technology should be there, just like movable furniture or, you know, interactive boards or whatever it is. It's there to help, you know, the delivery of the lesson. It's having the tools and being able to use them when it's appropriate.
Right. Yeah, and so the last one that we're talking about here is the technological content knowledge.
Yes. We were that one I thought was tough to define as well. I mean, I'm being honest. You know, I was doing a lot of research about what do they mean, so that I could try to then think about how to incorporate, you know, how to make it more personal for us. So I thought that one was a little bit difficult, but it really is about using relevant technology. You know, if you are teaching how to explore data, you know, in science, then you need to have an Excel spreadsheet, you know, to do that, or a calculator for math. And so it's, again, being able to marry the content with the proper technology. And, you know, a lot of it, I think, and I kind of put it in here, is curating and using digital resources. You know, we really are moving away from physical items, textbooks and whatnot, because, you know, it's just more effective to be able to curate things, and you may just want a bit of this or a bit of that. And so we felt like that was a big piece that connected content and technology, was going out and curating items with, you know, different forms of technology to then use in the classroom through pedagogy. So that was kind of how I saw those pieces fit together.
Right. Well, thanks. I mean, thanks for walking us through that. First of all, I would recommend. I thought this was a brilliant exercise to kind of walk through that before, when you showed me that, and write down action words. So kind of in the main circles, more so like what the pedagogy is, or you know, with content, really the product of that content. But then in between is action verbs, and it ties it together so well. And really just puts this into context in a way that I hadn't seen before. So I would definitely recommend, if anyone's out there is interested in doing, you know, in practicing TPACK and looking at this and seeing how it might be able to help you out in bringing technology into the classroom, you know, think about that and fill out a chart with that. I think it's very helpful in bringing it together.
Yeah, I would even like to, you know, maybe when I do roll it out, you know, it would be a good exercise to have a group, you know, brainstorm these things. and plug them in together. You know, this was kind of me exploring this on my own because I kind of had an idea where I wanted to take it, but I think it would be a good exercise to, you know, have a group of people get together and, you know, because again, it's kind of like engaging our students, you know, instead of just telling,
Right.
creating.
You had mentioned your one-to-one initiative. And I'm curious. So generally, when I see one-to-one initiatives, they tend to start with the technology first. It's very focused on let's get these devices into students' hands, and often a lot of the strategy comes apart from the rollout, but a lot of the strategy comes afterwards. You know, in terms of, okay, so how are we actually going to use these devices? What does learning look like with this device?
Right.
So could you talk through a little bit of how your one-to-one initiative started, and as you started to look at your educational strategy in a more holistic way, how it's evolved over time?
Sure, and we are that district that, just the way you described, it was, you know, very concentrated on getting the devices. You know, and there are a lot of logistics that go into the actual like just device side of it, you know, so there is a lot that goes into that, and I think that's naturally why people end up starting there, because you kind of have to figure out how you're going to get them and how you're going to hand them out, the actual physical logistics of the program. So I would say that happened with us. I mean, we passed a levy and we said, okay, we're going to do Chromebooks, and we bought them and we had a plan for handing them out to everybody. But you know, I don't know that we spent enough time getting ready for them, getting our teachers ready for them. And sometimes there's not a great way to do that. You only have so many PD days available with your staff. So even the best laid plans, I mean, sometimes you're not going to find out until they actually do get out there. I will tell you, with us, we started in grades 3 through 5 because we felt like we actually wanted to start with those grades because of the testing. And then we rolled up. So we went 3-5, then to the middle school, then to the high school, then back to K2. And once we rolled out at the 3-5, we had technology teachers in place who did an awesome job of having tech skills class and kind of getting the kids more familiar with the devices. But what we heard right away was from the teachers, not only, like, some of them were willing to try, you know, digital assessments and whatnot, and we were all using Google, so we knew how that worked, but they were drowning in file management. So right away, we started to get feedback where they were like, I need a better way to manage what I'm doing here. That's what kind of led us to look at, you know, what did we want to do? And we ended up looking at LMSs. So that's actually how we ended up selecting Schoology. So we, you know, vetted a bunch of different systems and we selected Schoology, and then we rolled that out. We were pretty aggressive how we rolled Schoology out here. We actually left our former gradebook and went in and started using Schoology as everything, as LMS and our gradebook. So it was not only about, yeah, I still have an eye twitch from that, but so it was a lot for our teachers to have to learn. I mean, they had all of these students walking in the door with a device, and then they had this brand new big program, including a gradebook, to learn. So again, a lot of the instruction was, how do I create an assignment? How do I put a column in the gradebook? You know, and how do I use it as a gradebook? And I would say that now we have the conversations of how do we really use effectively the LMS, because, you know, it's naturally progressed there. So when they get comfortable with one piece, you know, then you can kind of move into another piece. So where they started to understand how the gradebook worked and they were comfortable with that, and then they would say, why are all of these things just listed in my materials page? Then we could have the conversation about, you know, creating the assignment per se and using the tools in there to embed information and, you know, to do the grading and to build rubrics. And so that is the progression for us. I think we are, let's see, probably year 4. Yeah, we are, this is our 4th year with Schoology. And so the conversations, you know, from the first year to the 4th year have gotten much deeper. We're working in teams, like I said, creating content. We're actually involved in something called Ohio Blended Collaborative, where just a bunch of us that were administrators of Schoology started talking about what if we got our teachers together statewide, and using this platform started to create content and curate those digital resources and make them available. It has been amazing PD for our teachers, to really dig in and have the time. They're building courses. I mean, we have, I think, around 30 courses built from grades 5 through 12. So again, it's having that common platform. Those conversations can grow and deepen from just the nuts and bolts of how do I, create an assignment to why am I creating the assignment? What do I want to get out of the assignment? We are looking at, rubrics. What are we grading? How are we grading it? If you have 6 different components on a rubric and you only have one addressing content, we need to have conversations about that. If the student got all the content right, why are they getting a lower grade on the assignment if there's other things that you're grading that aren't necessarily tied to the standard? So again, it provides a way to have those deeper, sometimes difficult conversations about the practice of teaching. So I don't know if I completely answered your question, but that was the process that we have been through, is that we did just kind of put out devices, and now we are really being able to kind of dig in deeper, and the conversations are actually coming from the curriculum side of things. That's where the marriage, again, between curriculum and technology is so important, because where they're leading these important conversations, we are there saying, okay, so this is how you can use, Schoology to accomplish X, Y, and Z.
Over all this, when you're looking back, and you're thinking about the OnetoOne Initiative and thinking about other programs that you've had, or just the day-to-day, but when you're looking at it through your holistic lens, the TPACK lens, what lessons could you share with other directors of technology out there that you have learned over this time? Anything really stand out to you?
Well, I would say, I'm trying to think, there's so many. Well, I would say for us, I think we really kind of learned a few things, like the technology has to work. So there's your nuts and bolts side of the IT department. If you've rolled out a one-to-one program and they can't get on the wireless, then they lose faith, and they say, well, wait, why would I use this device, if it's nothing but a headache for me? So, there are growing pains. We updated all of our APs this summer, and, anytime that you do something like that, you have to kind of tweak the settings. And we went through a little bit of a growing pain in the beginning of the year doing that. But I kept trying to say, have faith. Keep communicating with us. Let us know if it's not working in your part of the building. Just, the more feedback that we get from each other, the better we're able to support you. So I think that making sure that, the technology works. We had, it was kind of a messy setup when we first rolled out, as far as how the Chromebooks were being repaired, or, how we ended up using our library software to handle all of the Chromebooks. So we use it just like you're assigning a book to a student through our library software. That's how we hand out the Chromebooks. And the libraries have become the epicenter in each building for handling that flow, that daily flow. And, we looked at some pain points in the process and really took some time to talk about it and straighten them out. So what happens is that the problems that were out there you start hearing less and less about that, because you're solving them. And then in turn, hopefully you're building trust with your people, that they trust that, you are getting things straightened out, and those aren't going to be pain points for them anymore. And I think on top of that, you're building relationships. We want people to feel comfortable to ask us questions. Not everybody is super comfortable with technology. There are lots of things I don't know how to do. I remember way back when I had to cook my first Thanksgiving dinner, there was another teacher that taught culinary, and we traded. She taught me how to cook Thanksgiving dinner, and I taught her how to do some technology things. So we all have strengths and weaknesses, and it's part of that growth mindset. That if you establish that relationship, hopefully they trust you enough to reach out and say, I think I want to try this. And then be there to support them. We do everything we can to make sure that we get to them and get them supported as quickly as possible, because we want them to keep trying. So those are some lessons, that we have learned. And then again, everything goes back to learning. Are we doing is this the best thing for kids? So when we have conversations, or if a teacher says, well, I want to try this, and it's like, oh, that's kind of hard to do. At the end of the day, is this what is best for the learning in that classroom and for the kids in those seats and for that teacher? If it is, then we will figure it out and make it work. And we're not afraid to reach out to other departments, for help. And we're all on a team here. It's tough. So I guess that's the other backup lesson for IT directors. Always put yourself in that teacher's shoes, because, I think when you haven't been in a classroom and you don't know how crazy it can be during the day, it's easy to, make a certain judgment or not. So spend a lot of time with your teachers and listen to them, because they're on the front lines. They know what they need and why they need it, and spend that time.
I think that's great advice. I can't thank you enough for being here and chatting with us today to give us a little insight into how your organization runs and what you've learned over that time. It really has been great to talk with you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Well, everyone, that's it. I hope you found that conversation as insightful as I did. Big thanks to Kim. I saw that she was checking in here. Now you know what TPACK can look like as a district level tool, which again, it can be incredibly powerful, even just to open up those conversations. I know we ran a little bit long, but there are last few things just real quick. Is that if you're interested in checking out more about TPACK, learning about it, definitely check out tpack.org. That's kind of the origin of all this. I would also, we just shared a link in the chat that is a link to one of our blog posts that is all about TPACK, kind of get your feet wet in that. And then there's also a lesson that, for lack of a better term, is TPACkified, I guess. Also, if you're interested in learning a little more about the learning management system that Kim's district has used to bring together their curriculum, instruction, and technology, we're going to post a link for that as well. I definitely recommend you get a demo of that. And lastly, we're going to be taking the summer off from these monthly webinars. So we'll see you in August. Have a great summer, everyone.